"I'm not the man you deserve," he said, but she whispered back, "Then become him." The Carolina autumn arrived in layers that year. First the dogwoods turning crimson along Main Street in Ashton, then the maples blazing gold against the Blue Ridge foothills. Claire Whitmore stood outside her family's law office, watching leaves cartwheel across the brick sidewalk, trying to remember the last time she'd felt genuinely excited about coming to work. The brass nameplate beside the door, Whitmore and Associates, Esther 1947, caught the morning light, a reminder of 3 generations of attorneys who'd served this town of 8,000 souls. Her grandfather had defended coal miners, her father had prosecuted white-collar crime. And Claire, she spent her days filing motions for property disputes and reviewing contracts for the new strip mall going up on Highway 74. She was 29, single, and according to her mother's increasingly pointed comments at Sunday dinner, wasting her prime years on a career that would never love her back. Before we go further into Claire's story, I'd love to hear from you. Please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Your support means everything, and I read every single comment. Now, let's continue. The morning she met Marcus Reed, Claire had been retrieving case files from the county courthouse basement, a dim maze of filing cabinets that smelled like old paper and floor wax. She'd been searching for a 1998 land deed when she heard footsteps on the concrete floor. A man emerged from between 2 tall cabinets, carrying a cardboard box labeled Reed Construction 2019. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing work boots and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Dark hair, several days of stubble, and eyes the color of smoke before a storm. He stopped when he saw her, and something passed between them. Recognition without prior meeting. The kind of moment that makes you believe in past lives or fate or whatever explanation keeps the universe from feeling random. "Sorry," he said, his voice rough, like he hadn't used it much that morning. "Didn't know anyone else would be down here this early." Claire found herself staring at the faded scar along his jawline. "I could say the same thing." He set the box down on a nearby table. "Marcus Reed, I'm here pulling old permits for a renovation project." Claire Whitmore, looking for property records. His expression shifted when she said her last name, a slight tension around his eyes. "Whitmore, as in Judge Whitmore?" "My father, yes." She watched him carefully. Most people in Ashton either revered or resented her father, who'd sat on the circuit court bench for 22 years before retiring. There was rarely middle ground. "He sent my brother to prison 12 years ago," Marcus said flatly. 5 years for felony assault, drove drunk, hit a guy outside a bar in Marshall, changed our whole family. The air between them felt charged now, but not with animosity, with something more complicated. Claire knew that case. Her father had talked about it at dinner, how the defense attorney had tried to argue self-defense, how the victim had nearly died, how the defendant had shown no real remorse. "I'm not my father," she said quietly. "I'm not my brother." Marcus picked up his box again. "But people in this town have long memories." He started to walk past her, then paused. "For what it's worth, your father was fair. Harsh, but fair. My brother deserved what he got. Doesn't make it easy for the rest of us, though. Reed name's been mud around here ever since." After he left, Claire stood in the basement for another 10 minutes, pretending to search through files while her hands trembled slightly. She didn't know why the encounter had shaken her so deeply. Maybe because she'd seen something in Marcus Reed's face that mirrored her own quiet desperation, the weight of family legacy, the suffocation of small-town expectations, the sense of being defined by things you had no control over. Over the next 3 weeks, she saw him everywhere. At the farmer's market on Saturday morning, buying late-season tomatoes. At the hardware store, comparing paint samples. At the coffee shop, where she stopped every morning, always sitting in the back corner with blueprints spread across the table. Each time they exchanged brief nods, careful acknowledgement that kept a respectful distance. Then came the Tuesday afternoon when Claire's paralegal, Joyce, dropped a file on her desk with unusual force. "You're going to want to look at this one personally." The case involved a zoning dispute. A construction company wanted to renovate the old textile mill on the east side of town, the massive brick building that had been abandoned since 2003, slowly decaying into an eyesore. The company planned to convert it into mixed-use space, apartments, small business storefronts, a community gathering area. But the project faced opposition from the Ashton Historical Preservation Society, led by none other than Margaret Whitmore, Claire's mother. The construction company was Reed Restoration, LLC. Marcus Reed was the owner. "This is going to be messy," Joyce said, her tone sympathetic. Joyce had worked for the Whitmore firm for 30 years and knew every family dynamic. "Your mother's already called twice today, asking when you'd be filing the injunction." "What injunction?" "The one she assumes you'll file to stop the demolition of historic interior elements. She's got the whole society worked up about it. Says Reed's planning to gut the building and destroy irreplaceable architectural features." Claire opened the file and began reading. The renovation plans were detailed and thoughtful. Marcus Reed had proposed preserving the original brick facade, maintaining the massive wooden support beams, even restoring the old water tower that rose from the center of the building. His designs incorporated the building's history while making it functional for modern use. This wasn't a developer trying to maximize profit by throwing up cheap construction. This was someone who understood what that mill had meant to this community. Her phone rang. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. "Claire, darling, I need you to file that motion by Friday. We cannot let some contractor with a criminal family destroy one of Ashton's most significant historic structures." "Mom, I haven't even reviewed the case fully yet." "What's to review?" "The Historical Preservation Act is clear. Buildings over 50 years old require special consideration before major renovations. We have grounds to at least delay the project while we conduct a proper assessment." "Have you actually looked at his plans?" A pause. "I don't need to look at plans drawn up by someone whose brother was a violent criminal. The Reeds have never cared about this community. They take, they destroy, they move on." Claire felt something snap inside her. "That's not fair." "Fair? Fair is protecting our town's heritage from people who don't understand its value. Your grandfather would have taken this case in a heartbeat. I expected the same from you." After her mother hung up, Claire sat at her desk until the autumn light faded from her office window. She thought about her grandfather, who'd actually fought for working people, who'd believed the law should protect the vulnerable from the powerful. She thought about her father, who'd enforced the law with rigid exactness, never bending even when mercy might have served justice better. And she thought about herself, who'd followed their path without ever asking if it was her own. At 6:47 p.m., she drove across town to the address listed on Reed Restoration's business registration. It was a small workshop on the industrial edge of Ashton, a metal building with lights still blazing. Through the window she could see Marcus bent over a drafting table. She knocked. He looked up, surprise crossing his face as he came to the door. "Miss Whitmore?" "Claire, and I need to see your full renovation plans for the textile mill." He studied her for a long moment. "Your mother sent you?" "No, my mother wants me to fight you in court. I want to understand what you're actually trying to do before I decide if that's necessary." Something in his expression softened. He stepped back, holding the door open. "Come in." His workshop was organized chaos. power tools hung on pegboard walls, lumber stacked in precise rows, and 3 different drafting tables covered with blueprints and sketches. The space smelled like sawdust and coffee. On one wall, he'd hung photographs of old buildings, barns, mills, factories, all in various states of restoration. "I started the business 6 years ago," Marcus said, rolling out the complete mill plans across his largest table. "After my brother went to prison, I couldn't find construction work anywhere in this county. Reed name was poison, so I moved to Knoxville, learned restoration carpentry from a guy who specialized in historic preservation, worked on projects all over Tennessee and Kentucky, made a reputation, saved money." He pointed to the detailed drawings. 2 years ago, I came back to Ashton, bought my grandmother's old house, started my own company. The mill's been my dream project since I was a kid. My grandfather worked there for 43 years. My father, too, before it closed. This building is Ashton's history, including my family's. I'm not trying to destroy it. I'm trying to save it. Claire leaned over the plans, genuinely studying them now. Every detail showed respect for the original structure. He'd marked which walls were load-bearing and historic, which could be modified, where modern systems could be integrated without damaging architectural integrity. He'd even included plans to preserve and restore the original time clock, the supervisor's office, the loading dock that had once bustled with workers. "This is beautiful work," she said quietly. "Your mother doesn't think so." "My mother doesn't know about it. She's reacting to your name, not your actual plans." Marcus crossed his arms, leaning against the table. "And you? Are you reacting to my name?" Claire met his eyes. The charge between them was stronger now, unmistakable. "I'm trying not to. But this town makes it hard. Everyone's divided into families, histories, old grudges. The Whitmores and the Reeds aren't supposed to be on the same side. Who says we're on the same side? Your plans say so. My conscience says so. But if I don't file that injunction, my mother will find another attorney who will. And if I do file it, I'll be helping to destroy something genuinely worthwhile. So I'm caught." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "There's a third option." "Which is, you represent me. Help me navigate the Preservation Society's objections. Show them what I'm actually trying to do. Your name carries weight in this town. If a Whitmore says my project deserves approval, people listen. That would destroy my relationship with my mother." "I know." He said it gently, acknowledging the cost. "That's why I'm not asking, just putting it out there as a possibility." Claire looked down at the blueprints again, at the careful notations and measurements, at the evidence of someone who truly cared about doing this right. When she looked back up, Marcus was watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. Not expectation or pressure, but understanding. He knew what he was asking. He knew what it would cost. "Let me think about it," she said. "I need 48 hours. He nodded. "Fair enough." As she drove home through the dark October streets, past the houses she'd known her entire life, Claire felt something shifting in her chest. It wasn't just about the mill project. It was about the realization that she'd spent 29 years being the person her family expected, following paths they'd laid out, never questioning if those paths led anywhere she actually wanted to go. The Whitmore name meant something in Ashton. It meant integrity, service, leadership. But it also meant rigid certainty, class consciousness, and the belief that some families were simply better than others. Claire had absorbed those values without examination, wearing them like a second skin. Now, for the first time, they felt too tight. She thought about Marcus Reed, about the way he'd spoken about his brother's crime without excuses, about the care he'd put into preserving a building that represented his own family's working-class history, about the quiet dignity with which he'd handled her family name, despite every reason to resent it. He wasn't asking her to betray her principles. He was asking her to examine them, to decide what she truly believed beyond what she'd been taught to believe. The next morning, Claire called Joyce into her office and closed the door. "I need you to tell me everything you remember about the Reed assault case, not the legal record, the real story." Joyce settled into the chair across from Claire's desk with a sigh. "You sure you want to open that box?" "I'm sure." Michael Reed, Marcus's older brother, was always troubled. Good-looking, charming, but had a mean streak when he drank. The night of the assault, he'd been at Bailey's bar, getting drunk and picking fights. Guy named Tom Parsons told him to settle down or leave. Michael took a swing at him in the parking lot. Parsons fought back, and Michael grabbed a tire iron from his truck. Beat Parsons so badly he was in a coma for 3 days. Claire absorbed this. And Marcus. Marcus was 17 when it happened. He'd dropped out of high school to help support the family after their father had a stroke. He was working 3 jobs: construction during the day, stocking shelves at night, weekend work at the lumber yard. Smart kid, everyone said. Kept his head down, never caused trouble. But after Michael went to prison, the whole family got painted with the same brush. Their mother, Sarah, lost her job at the bank. Marcus couldn't find steady work. Even their younger sister got bullied at school. "That's not fair." Joyce gave her a knowing look. "Fair doesn't have much to do with how small towns work, honey. You know that." That evening, Claire drove to her parents' house for the weekly family dinner she'd been attending religiously for 29 years. The colonial-style home sat on 3 acres overlooking the valley, with mountain views and a circular driveway. Inside, her mother had set the table with the good china. She always did when Claire came. Her father, retired Judge William Whitmore, was reading the newspaper in his study. Her mother, Margaret, was in the kitchen directing the housekeeper through final dinner preparations. Her younger sister, Amanda, had married a dentist and moved to Charlotte 3 years ago, rarely visiting. Tonight was just the 3 of them. "Claire, darling, did you file the motion?" her mother asked before they'd even sat down. "No, I've been reviewing the case." Her father looked up from his wine glass. "What's to review? If the Historical Preservation Society wants an injunction, they have grounds. It's straightforward." Claire set down her fork carefully. "Actually, it's not. Reed's renovation plans are exceptional. He's preserving everything historically significant while making the building functional. The society hasn't even looked at his actual designs." "Reed," her father repeated, his voice cooling. "That name keeps coming back to haunt this family. His brother's case was 12 years ago, and the damage he did to Tom Parsons was permanent. The man still has cognitive issues. Marcus Reed may not have committed the crime, but he comes from that same environment, that same moral framework." Claire felt heat rising in her chest. "That's not fair. That's prejudice based on class and family association, not facts." Her mother's eyes narrowed. "Claire Elizabeth Whitmore, are you actually defending that man?" "I'm defending good work and honest intentions, which is what I thought being a lawyer was supposed to mean." The dinner deteriorated from there. Her father launched into a lecture about professional reputation and community standing. Her mother turned icy, making pointed comments about Claire's judgment and the importance of family loyalty. By the time Claire left, she felt exhausted and angry, and underneath it all, strangely liberated. She drove to Marcus Reed's workshop without calling first. It was almost 9 p.m., but light still glowed through the windows. When he answered her knock, he was wearing the same flannel shirt, sawdust in his hair. "I'll represent you," Claire said. "I'll help you navigate the Preservation Society's objections and present your case to the zoning board. But I need you to understand what this means. My mother will probably never forgive me. My father will see it as a betrayal of everything our family stands for. I'll lose standing in the social circles I've been part of my entire life." Marcus stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The October night was crisp, stars brilliant above them. "Then don't do it. I'll find another way." "No," Claire said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "I'm doing it because it's right, and because I'm tired of making decisions based on what other people expect, instead of what I actually believe." He studied her face in the porch light. "This isn't going to be easy." "I know. People will talk. They'll say you've lost your mind, that I've manipulated you somehow. They'll drag your family name through gossip and speculation. Let them." Something shifted in Marcus's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Okay, then. When do we start?" "Tomorrow. I'll request copies of all your permits, plans, and assessments. We'll prepare a presentation for the zoning board meeting next month. And we'll invite the Preservation Society to a private viewing of your plans before then, so they can see what you're actually proposing." As she drove home that night, Claire's phone buzzed with text messages from her mother. She didn't read them. Instead, she thought about Marcus Reed's scarred hands and careful blueprints, about the way he'd given her an out, even though he needed her help, about the fact that he was trying to restore a building that represented his own family's history, despite this town's determination to keep him in a box labeled criminal's brother. She thought about the question that had been forming in her mind since that first encounter in the courthouse basement. What if the person you're supposed to become is nothing like the person you were raised to be? For the first time in years, Claire felt like she was about to find out. The next 6 weeks transformed Claire's understanding of both Marcus Reed and her own capacity for defiance. They met 3 times a week at his workshop, going over plans and strategy, preparing for the zoning board presentation. She discovered he had a degree in architectural engineering from NC State. He'd completed it online while working full-time, taking 8 years to finish what most people did in 4. She learned about his grandmother, who'd raised him and his siblings after their father's stroke, teaching them to find dignity in honest work rather than shortcuts. She saw photographs of his previous restoration projects, a 1920s train depot in Knoxville, a historic black church in Chattanooga, a tobacco barn in Kentucky that he'd converted into a community arts center. Every detail revealed someone who'd built himself into exactly the kind of person her family claimed didn't exist among the working-class families of Ashton. And every hour they spent together deepened the tension neither of them acknowledged directly. The way their hands would brush over blueprints, the way his voice softened when he explained his vision for the mill, the way she found herself staying later than necessary just to keep talking. "You don't have to do this," Marcus said one evening in mid-November. They'd been working for 4 hours straight, and Claire's eyes ached from reviewing zoning regulations. "Your mother sent another letter today. Formal notice that the Preservation Society is considering legal action against the project. She's not backing down." "Neither am I." He set down his pencil and looked at her directly. "Why? Really, why are you doing this? It can't just be about the building." Claire was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the first snow of the season was starting to fall, soft flakes drifting past the workshop windows. "My whole life, I've been told that the Whitmore family represents the best of Ashton, education, service, moral authority, and I believed it. I thought being part of that legacy meant something important." She stood up, pacing toward the window. "But lately, I've been realizing that what my family actually represents is the ability to judge other people from a position of inherited advantage. My great-grandfather made his money in tobacco and land speculation. My grandfather defended miners, but lived in the nicest house in town. My father sent people to prison with absolute certainty, but never once questioned whether the system he was upholding was fair to begin with. And my mother believes that her good taste and social connections make her morally superior to families who work with their hands." She turned back to face him. "You asked me why I'm doing this. I'm doing it because your project is the first thing I've encountered in my legal career that actually means something beyond property rights and billable hours. And because if I can't stand up against my own family's prejudice, then I'm not the lawyer I thought I was. I'm just another person maintaining the status quo that keeps some people in their place. Marcus stood up slowly. That's the most honest thing anyone's said to me in years. Yeah, well, honesty's expensive. My mother's not speaking to me. My father sent me an email suggesting I take a leave of absence from the firm for personal reflection. 3 clients have transferred their accounts to other attorneys, and Sarah Mitchell, remember her, we were best friends in high school. She crossed the street yesterday to avoid talking to me. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not. Claire surprised herself with the truth of it. I'm angrier than I've ever been, but I'm not sorry. Because this is the first time I've ever made a choice that's entirely my own. The snow was falling harder now, accumulating on the ground. Marcus checked his watch. It's almost midnight. Roads are going to be bad. You should probably stay here until morning. I've got a guest room upstairs where I crash sometimes when I work late. Claire should have said no. Should have driven home through the snow, maintained professional boundaries, kept their relationship strictly about the project. Instead, she heard herself say, "Okay." The guest room was small but comfortable, a twin bed, a lamp, a stack of books about architecture and restoration. Marcus brought her a spare toothbrush and a clean t-shirt to sleep in. "Bathroom's down the hall. I'll be in the workshop if you need anything." But neither of them moved. They stood in the doorway, snow falling outside the window, the world narrowed down to just the two of them, and the unspoken thing that had been building between them for weeks. "Claire," Marcus said quietly, "I need you to know something. Whatever's happening here between us, whatever this is, I'm not taking advantage of you. If you want me to step back, if this is complicating things..." She kissed him, reached up, pulled him down to her height, and kissed him with all the certainty she'd been missing in every other area of her life. He responded immediately, one hand cupping her face, the other settling at her waist, kissing her back with an intensity that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "That was probably a bad idea. Terrible idea," Claire agreed. "The worst. People will say I manipulated you, that I seduced you to get legal representation. People will say whatever protects their existing beliefs. They always do." He pulled back slightly, studying her face. "I mean it, though. I'm not the man you deserve. I don't have the education, or the social standing, or the clean family history. I'm the guy whose brother nearly killed someone, whose mother cleaned houses for a living, who took 8 years to finish college because I had to work 3 jobs. Your family's right to disapprove." Claire felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. "You know what I deserve? Someone who's honest, someone who works hard and cares about doing things right, someone who sees a derelict building and imagines bringing it back to life instead of tearing it down for profit. That's you, Marcus. Not some fantasy version of respectability my family wants me to marry. They'll make your life hell. They already are. At least this way I'm choosing it." They didn't sleep together that night. Both of them knew that crossing that line before the zoning board hearing would give ammunition to everyone who wanted to discredit them. But they lay on the small bed together, fully clothed, talking until the snow stopped and dawnlight filtered through the window. Marcus told her about his childhood, about watching the mill close and seeing his whole community hollowed out by job losses, about his brother's violence and addiction, about the guilt of loving someone while knowing they'd destroyed innocent lives, about the years in Knoxville learning restoration work, dreaming about coming home and proving that the Reed name could mean something good. Claire told him about the suffocation of expectation, about graduating law school with honors and returning to Ashton because that's what Whitmore's did. about the endless stream of property disputes and contract reviews that never connected to anything she cared about watching her sister escape to Charlotte while she stayed behind, the good daughter, the responsible one, slowly realizing she'd built a life that looked impressive from the outside, but felt empty within. "What do you actually want?" Marcus asked as grey morning light filled the room. "I don't know yet," Claire admitted, "but I'm starting to figure it out." The day when she finally left at 7 a.m., driving home through snow-covered streets to shower and change before work, Claire felt fundamentally different. The town looked the same Victorian houses, same church steeples, same mountains rising in the distance. But she saw it now with different eyes, understanding that Ashton wasn't a single thing. It was layers of history and competing values, families like hers who'd benefited from economic structures built on other people's labor, and families like Marcus's who'd done that labor and then been discarded when it was no longer profitable. The textile mill renovation wasn't just about preserving a building, it was about who got to define the town's future, whose history mattered, whose vision of community would prevail. At the office, Joyce took one look at Claire's face and said, "You slept with him." "No, but I want to." Joyce sighed, but she was smiling. "You know this is going to explode, right? Your mother's going to lose her mind. Half the town's going to think you've been enchanted by some kind of working-class magic. The other half's going to think you're having a breakdown." "I know. And you're doing it anyway." "I'm doing it anyway." Joyce patted her hand. "Good. About time someone in this family stopped caring what Margaret Whitmore thinks." The explosion came 2 days later, when Claire's mother appeared at the law office unannounced, walking past Joyce without permission and slamming Claire's office door behind her. "Is it true?" Margaret demanded. "Are you sleeping with that Reed man?" "Who told you that?" "Everyone's talking about it. Patricia Norton saw your car parked outside his workshop at 7 in the morning. You're making yourself look cheap and desperate, Claire. This is exactly the kind of scandal that ruins careers." Claire felt remarkably calm. "I'm not sleeping with Marcus Reed. But even if I were, that's my business, not yours or Patricia Norton's or anyone else's in your preservation society. He's using you. No, he's treating me like an equal, like someone with her own mind and her own agency, which is more than you've ever done." Margaret's face flushed. "How dare you? After everything your father and I have done for you." "Everything you've done for me has been conditional," Claire interrupted. "Love me if I go to law school. Respect me if I join the family firm. Accept me if I marry the right kind of man and maintain the right kind of reputation. Well, I'm done with conditions. I'm 30 years old, Mom. I get to decide what my life looks like. Even if it means destroying your career, your reputation, your family's standing in this community. If my family's standing depends on me discriminating against someone because of his last name, then maybe that standing isn't worth preserving." Her mother left without another word, but she returned the next day with her attorney, Gerald Patterson, who'd been the Whitmore family lawyer for 20 years. He sat in Claire's office with a thick folder and a sympathetic expression. "Claire, I'm here because your parents are worried about you. They believe Marcus Reed may be taking advantage of your inexperience with this type of case. I graduated second in my law school class and have been practicing for 7 years. I'm not inexperienced. In zoning and preservation law specifically, because Reed's case is complex and your parents are concerned you're in over your head. They've asked me to review your work and ensure you're providing competent representation." Claire understood what was happening. Her parents were trying to find grounds to claim she was acting unethically, giving them ammunition to either force her off the case or damage her credibility before the zoning board. "Mr. Patterson, I appreciate your concern, but my representation of Marcus Reed is completely professional and well within my areas of competence. If my parents want to challenge that, they can file a formal complaint with the state bar. Otherwise, this conversation is over. After he left, Claire sat at her desk with her head in her hands, wondering if she'd just destroyed her career. Joyce brought her coffee and a chocolate croissant from the bakery down the street. "Your grandmother would be proud," Joyce said quietly. Claire looked up. "What?" "Your father's mother, Eleanor Whitmore. She was different from the rest of that family. Volunteered at the library, taught adult literacy classes, helped immigrant families navigate the legal system. Your grandfather would complain that she was wasting her time on people who wouldn't appreciate it. But she'd tell him that privilege wasn't something to hoard. It was something to share. You remind me of her." That night, Claire drove to the cemetery, where her grandmother was buried. The November air was sharp and cold, smelling of wood smoke and coming snow. She stood by the headstone, Eleanor Whitmore, 1935-2014, beloved mother and friend, and said out loud, "I hope I'm doing the right thing." The wind blew through the bare trees. No answer came, but Claire felt steadier somehow, connected to a version of her family history that wasn't about judgment and exclusion, but about service and empathy. She drove to Marcus's workshop. He was expecting her. They had a meeting scheduled to finalize their presentation for the zoning board. But when she walked in, instead of going straight to the blueprints, she said, "I need you to tell me the truth about something." "Okay. Why did you really come back to Ashton? You had a successful business in Knoxville. You could have worked anywhere. Why return to a town that treated your family like criminals?" Marcus set down his coffee cup. "Because running away doesn't change anything. I could have stayed in Knoxville forever, built a whole life there, and Ashton would still define the reeds by my brother's worst moment. I came back because I wanted to prove that my family's story is bigger than one person's mistakes, that we belong here too, that we've contributed to this community, even if people like your mother don't want to acknowledge it. And the Mill Project is my way of saying that working-class history matters, that the people who built this town with their hands deserve to be remembered and honored, not erased. Your families had their names on buildings and streets and law offices for generations. My families had their labor dismissed and forgotten. The mill is my chance to change that." Claire crossed the workshop and kissed him again. This time, neither of them pulled away. This time, they let the kiss deepen into something that acknowledged the truth they'd both been avoiding. This wasn't just about the project anymore. This was about two people who'd found each other in the middle of a battle neither of them had asked for, but both were committed to finishing. When they finally broke apart, Marcus said, "If we do this, if we're together like this, it's going to make everything harder. Your family will use it against you. The Preservation Society will claim I seduced you to manipulate the case. We'll give them ammunition. I know, I don't care. You might care later when the costs add up." Claire looked around the workshop, at his careful blueprints and restoration photographs, at the evidence of someone who'd built himself through determination and honest work, at the man who'd kissed her like she was something precious and rare. "Then become him," she said. "What?" "You said you're not the man I deserve, so become him. Be the person you want to be, and let me decide if that's what I deserve. Stop letting other people's judgments define your worth. Stop believing that your brother's mistakes are your burden. You're Marcus Reed. You restore broken things and make them beautiful again. That's exactly who I need." His eyes were bright, with something that might have been tears. "You say that now. But what happens when your mother disinherits you? When your father refuses to speak to you? When you lose clients and social standing and everything your family name has built? Then I'll find out who I am without all that," Claire said. "And I'm betting I'll like her better." They made love that night in the small room above the workshop, with snow falling outside and blueprints scattered on every surface. It was tender and intense, and completely lacking in the caution they probably should have maintained. Afterward, lying tangled together in the narrow bed, Marcus traced patterns on her bare shoulder and said, "I'm in love with you, just so we're clear about that." "I'm in love with you too," Claire replied, which is probably the worst possible timing. "Terrible timing," he agreed. "The absolute worst." But neither of them felt like it was wrong. Against every reasonable objection, against family pressure and social expectation, and the chaos that was surely coming, being together felt like the first truly right decision Claire had made in years. The zoning board hearing was scheduled for December 18th, 3 weeks away. They spent every available hour preparing, Claire researching preservation law precedents, Marcus refining his drawings, both of them rehearsing the presentation until they could deliver it seamlessly. Joyce helped with administrative work, filing motions and preparing exhibits, and quietly, carefully, Claire began reaching out to other people in Ashton who might be willing to support the project. She started with Tom Parsons. It took courage to make that call. Parsons was the man Michael Reed had beaten nearly to death, the victim whose suffering had sent Marcus's brother to prison. But Claire had learned through her research that Parsons was now a counselor at the community center, working with at-risk youth and addiction recovery programs. If anyone understood that people were more than their worst moments, it might be him. They met at the coffee shop on a grey December afternoon. Parsons was in his 50s now, with grey threading through his dark hair and a slight hesitation in his speech, lasting effects from the brain injury. Claire explained about the mill project, about Marcus's renovation plans, about the Preservation Society's opposition. "Why are you telling me this?" Parsons asked. "Because your voice carries weight in this community, and because I think you might understand that Marcus Reed isn't his brother." Parsons was quiet for a long time, stirring his coffee. Finally he said, "Michael Reed destroyed part of my life. I won't pretend otherwise. I still have headaches, memory problems, trouble processing complex information. What he did was unforgivable." Claire's heart sank. But then Parsons continued, "But Marcus Reed came to see me 6 years ago, right after he moved back to Ashton. He apologized for his brother's crime, even though he wasn't responsible for it. He asked if there was anything he could do to help me. I told him no, that I didn't want anything from his family. But he kept showing up, volunteered at the community center, helped repair our building when we had water damage. Never made a big deal about it, never asked for recognition, just did the work." He met Claire's eyes. "Marcus Reed is nothing like his brother, and if he's trying to restore that mill, I'll speak in favor of it. That building represents everyone who worked there, including my own father. It deserves better than to rot away because some people can't see past old grudges." When Claire told Marcus about the conversation, he looked stunned. "Tom Parsons is supporting the project. He's speaking at the hearing, and he's helping me reach out to other former mill workers and their families." Over the next 2 weeks, a quiet coalition began to form. Former mill employees who remembered the building's glory days, small business owners who saw the potential for economic revitalization, young families who wanted to see Ashton's downtown transformed into something vibrant and functional. Even some members of the Preservation Society began to quietly signal their support after Joyce arranged for them to view Marcus's plans directly. But Margaret Whitmore dug in harder. She convinced the society to hire an expert witness, a historic preservation consultant from Chapel Hill, who would testify that Reed's plans, while superficially respectful of the building's history, actually represented a dangerous precedent for allowing commercial interests to override authentic preservation standards. Claire worked 18-hour days preparing the counter-argument. Her relationship with her parents had deteriorated to silence. Her father sent one final email. "You are making a mistake that will haunt you for the rest of your life." Her mother sent nothing at all. 3 days before the hearing, Claire found an envelope slipped under her office door. Inside was a single photograph, taken with a telephoto lens, showing Claire and Marcus kissing outside his workshop. On the back, someone had written, "How far will she go for him?" Joyce found Claire staring at the photo, hands shaking. "Who sent this?" "I don't know. But they're going to use it at the hearing. They're going to claim I'm compromised, that I can't represent Marcus objectively because we're involved." "Are they wrong?" Claire looked up sharply, but Joyce's expression was gentle, not judgmental. "I can represent him objectively," Claire said. "My feelings for him don't change the fact that his project deserves approval. The plans are solid, the historical preservation is meticulous, the community benefit is clear." "I know that. But will the zoning board know that? Or will they see a young woman who's thrown away her family's respect for a man with the wrong last name?" The question haunted Claire for the next 3 days. She and Marcus barely slept, running through their presentation again and again, anticipating every possible objection. On the morning of the hearing, Claire dressed in her most conservative suit, navy blue, nothing flashy, projecting competence and professionalism. She met Marcus outside the municipal building at 8:30 a.m. "You ready?" she asked. He nodded, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Are you? Last chance to step back. Let me handle this alone." "I'm not stepping back." The hearing room was packed. Claire's parents sat in the front row, with the Preservation Society members, her mother's face set in rigid disapproval. Tom Parsons was there, along with a dozen other former mill workers. The zoning board consisted of 5 members, 3 appointed by the town council, 2 elected by special district. Claire knew 2 of them were likely sympathetic to her mother's position. 2 were genuinely undecided. One, Susan Chen, had recently moved to Ashton from California and might be open to fresh perspectives. The hearing lasted 4 hours. The Preservation Society's attorney presented first, arguing that Reed's project set a dangerous precedent. Their expert witness testified about the importance of maintaining historical buildings exactly as they'd been, without modern modifications that might compromise architectural integrity. Then came Margaret Whitmore's testimony. She spoke eloquently about the mill's significance to Ashton's history, about the responsibility of preserving heritage for future generations. But then she said something that made Claire's blood run cold. "We must also consider the character of those seeking to alter our historic structures. Mr. Reed comes from a family with a documented history of violence and disregard for community standards. Can we truly trust such a person with one of Ashton's most significant buildings?" The room erupted in murmurs. Susan Chen, the zoning board chair, called for order. Marcus's jaw was clenched, but he kept his expression neutral. Claire squeezed his hand under the table. When it was their turn, Claire stood and delivered the presentation they'd prepared. She walked the board through Marcus's plans in exhaustive detail, showing how every element preserved the building's historic character while making it functional for modern use. She presented letters of support from former mill workers, testimonials from business owners who'd worked with Reed Restoration, photographs of Marcus's previous projects. Then came Tom Parsons' testimony. He stood slowly, his speech careful and deliberate due to his injury, and said, "Michael Reed destroyed part of my life. But Marcus Reed has spent 6 years proving he's nothing like his brother. He's volunteered in our community. He's built a business based on integrity and quality work, and he's trying to preserve a building that matters to all of us. If we punish him for his brother's crimes, we're no better than the people who judged Tom based on where he came from. We're better than that. Ashton is better than that." The room was silent. Claire saw her mother's face go pale. Marcus spoke last. He was nervous. Claire could tell from the way his hands gripped the podium, but his voice was steady. "I'm not going to pretend my family's history doesn't matter. My brother committed a terrible crime. My family has struggled with addiction and poverty and the consequences of bad choices. Those are facts, but they're not the only facts about us." He pointed to the photographs Claire had displayed. "My grandfather worked at that mill for 43 years. My father for 32. They were good men who worked hard and loved their families. When the mill closed, it didn't just destroy jobs, it destroyed people's sense of purpose and dignity. That building represents the best of what Ashton was, a place where people could work with their hands and build good lives." His voice strengthened. "I'm asking for permission to restore the mill, not despite my family's history, but because of it. Because I believe Ashton is a town that honors all its history, not just the parts that look good on Preservation Society brochures. Because I believe this community is big enough to include families like mine, alongside families like the Whitmores. And because I'm betting that most people in this room want to see that building brought back to life, not left to rot away while we argue about who's worthy enough to touch it." The zoning board deliberated for 90 minutes. Claire and Marcus sat in the hallway outside, not speaking, just holding hands while the town's future and their own hung in balance. When they were called back in, Susan Chen delivered the verdict. By a vote of 4-1, the Ashton Zoning Board approves the renovation plans for the textile mill project submitted by Reed Restoration LLC. "Mr. Reed, you have 6 months to complete the initial phase. Will require quarterly progress reports and a final inspection before occupancy permits are issued." The room exploded, some people cheering, others protesting. Claire saw her mother stand abruptly and walk out without looking back. Her father followed, but Tom Parsons was smiling and Joyce was wiping tears from her eyes, and the former mill workers were shaking Marcus's hand with genuine warmth. Outside the municipal building, in the cold December afternoon, Marcus pulled Claire into his arms. "We did it." "You did it," she corrected. "I just helped present." "No, you stood up against your entire family for something you believed in. You risked everything. That's not just helping, that's heroic." Claire laughed, feeling giddy with relief and exhaustion. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a lawyer who finally found a case worth fighting for." But even as she said it, she knew the hardest part was still ahead. They'd won the zoning board's approval, but the social battle was just beginning. Her mother's fury, her father's disappointment, the town's judgment, all of that remained unresolved. That night, lying in Marcus's arms in the small apartment above the workshop, Claire said, "I need to talk to my parents. Really talk. Not just fight. Even if they never forgive me, I need them to understand why I made this choice." "Are you sure?" "No, but I have to try." The week before Christmas, Claire drove to her parents' house without calling first. The colonial sat pristine in the winter afternoon, its windows glowing with warm light. Through the glass, she could see her mother moving around the kitchen, preparing for the Christmas party the Whitmores hosted every year, a tradition going back 3 generations. Claire had not been invited this year. She rang the doorbell. Her mother answered, surprise and something else. Was it hope, flickering across her face before settling back into cool reserve? "Claire, Mom, can we talk, please?" Margaret stepped back, allowing her in. The house smelled like pine and cinnamon, festive and familiar. Claire's father emerged from his study, his expression unreadable. They sat in the living room, the same room where Claire had spent countless Christmas mornings, birthday celebrations, family gatherings, the same room where 18 months ago her father had toasted her partnership in the family firm. Now the space felt foreign, charged with unspoken hurt. "I need you to understand something," Claire began. "What I did, representing Marcus, standing against the Preservation Society's position, wasn't about rebelling against you, or rejecting our family. It was about being honest about what I believe. You humiliated us, her mother said, in front of the entire town. I disagreed with you. That's not the same as humiliation. Her father leaned forward. You're in a relationship with a man whose brother is a convicted felon. You've associated our family name with people we've spent generations distinguishing ourselves from. How is that not humiliation? Claire felt the old anger rising, but forced herself to speak calmly. Dad, do you remember the essay I wrote for my law school applications, the one about why I wanted to be a lawyer? He nodded slowly. I wrote about grandfather, about how he defended coal miners against mine owners who violated safety regulations, about how he believed the law should protect the vulnerable, not just the powerful. That's what inspired me. But somewhere along the way, I lost that. I became a lawyer who protects property interests and enforces contracts. Safe, profitable, boring work. She looked at both her parents. Marcus Reed reminded me of what I wanted to be. He's not asking for special treatment or easy answers. He's asking for the chance to contribute to this community despite his family history. And that's exactly the kind of case grandfather would have taken. Your grandfather would never have gotten personally involved with a client, her mother countered. Maybe not, but maybe that's because he lived in a different time, when professional boundaries were absolute and personal feelings were supposed to be irrelevant. I don't believe that anymore. I think the law works best when lawyers actually care about the people they represent, when they see them as whole human beings instead of just cases. Her father was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Are you in love with him?" "Yes." "And if the relationship ends, if he breaks your heart, will you regret sacrificing your family's respect for something temporary?" Claire considered the question honestly. "I might regret how things ended, but I won't regret standing up for what I believed was right. Even if Marcus and I don't work out long-term, the Mill project was worth fighting for, and learning to trust my own judgment instead of just deferring to family expectations, that was worth it too." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "I raised you to be better than this." "No, Mom. You raised me to be obedient. There's a difference." The words hung in the air between them. Claire saw her mother flinch, saw her father's jaw tighten, but she also saw something else, a flicker of recognition maybe, or the beginning of understanding. "I'm not asking you to approve of my choices," Claire continued. "I'm asking you to accept that they're mine to make. I'm 30 years old. I'm a competent attorney. I'm capable of making decisions about my life and my career without your permission. And yes, sometimes those decisions will disappoint you, but they're still mine." Her mother stood up, walking to the window. When she turned back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to watch your child make choices you know will hurt them? Then stop watching through the lens of what you think should happen and start seeing what's actually happening," Claire said gently. "I'm not being destroyed by this relationship. I'm not ruining my career. I'm finally building something that matters to me. Can't you see that?" Her father spoke, his voice softer than she'd heard in weeks. "Your mother and we've always wanted the best for you. Perhaps we've been too rigid in defining what best means." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first crack in the wall between them. Claire left her parents' house without resolution, but with something almost as valuable: honesty. She'd said what needed saying. Whether they could accept it was their choice, not hers. Christmas came quietly. Claire spent it with Marcus at his grandmother's house, a small ranch-style home on the south side of town where 3 generations of Reeds gathered for ham and sweet potatoes and stories about the old days. Marcus's mother, Sarah, was cautious around Claire at first, clearly uncertain about this Whitmore woman who'd entered her son's life. But by evening's end, after Claire had helped wash dishes and listened to Grandmother Reed's stories about the mill's glory days, Sarah pulled her aside. "Marcus has been hurt before," she said quietly. "Not by women, by this town's judgment. By people who looked at our last name and decided who we were without knowing us. If you're with him just to rebel against your family, it'll destroy him." "I'm not," Claire said firmly. "I'm with him because he's the best man I've ever met. Because he sees broken things and imagines how to make them whole again. Because he came back to a town that treated him like garbage and decided to prove them wrong through his work rather than his words." Sarah's eyes grew bright. "Then you're welcome here, always." The mill renovation began on January 15th. Marcus hired a crew of 8, including 2 former mill workers and Tom Parsons' nephew, who'd recently completed a carpentry apprenticeship. Claire stopped by the site every few days, watching as Marcus carefully removed damaged sections while preserving original beams and brickwork. The massive space slowly transformed, rubble cleared away, windows restored, the old water tower stabilized and repainted. By March, the renovation had become a community event. Local photographers documented the progress. The Historical Society, minus Margaret Whitmore, began planning an exhibit about the mill's history to be displayed in the renovated space. Small business owners signed leases for the future storefronts. Young couples put deposits on the apartments. Claire's law practice shifted too. After representing Marcus successfully, other clients began seeking her out. People who needed an attorney willing to challenge established power structures rather than maintain them. A group of mobile home park residents facing unfair rent increases. A small organic farm fighting a corporate developer's water rights claim. An immigrant family navigating a complex custody situation. Joyce noticed the change. "You've found your niche. Cases your grandfather would have taken." "Cases that actually matter," Claire agreed. But the distance from her parents remained. They didn't call. They didn't attend Easter service at the same time Claire did, switching to the earlier service to avoid her. When Claire saw her mother at the grocery store in April, Margaret turned and walked down a different aisle without acknowledgement. It hurt more than Claire wanted to admit. "Maybe they'll never come around," she told Marcus one evening in late April. They were sitting on the mill's newly restored loading dock, watching the sun set over the mountains. The building was 3/4 complete now, its bones solid and beautiful. "Then you've still made the right choice," Marcus said. "You can't live your life waiting for other people's approval, even your parents'. That's not freedom. That's a different kind of prison." "When did you get so wise?" He laughed. "Years of therapy after my brother went to prison. Had to figure out how to live with a family history I couldn't change. Best money I ever spent." In May, something unexpected happened. Claire received a letter, handwritten on her father's legal stationery. "Dear Claire, your mother and I have been reflecting on the past 6 months. We've watched you build a legal practice that serves people we never considered worthy of our attention. We've heard about the mill renovation's progress and the community support it's generated. We've seen you with Marcus Reed, how he treats you with respect and genuine partnership. Yet, we still believe you made your choices in the most difficult way possible. We still wish you'd consulted us, trusted our judgment, maintained family unity, but we're beginning to understand that you're not the daughter we raised to be obedient. You're the daughter we raised to be principled, even when principle comes at personal cost. Your mother isn't ready to reach out yet. Her pride runs deep, and the public nature of your disagreement wounded her more than she'll admit. But I wanted you to know. I drove past the mill last week. I saw what Marcus Reed is building. It's good work, Claire. Honest work. The kind of work that makes a community stronger. I'm proud of you, even if I'm still struggling with how we got here. Dad. Claire read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't complete reconciliation, but it was something. Recognition, respect, the possibility of eventual healing. She showed it to Marcus that evening. He read it carefully, then pulled her close. "This is good, really good. It's a start," Claire agreed. "I don't know if my mother will ever forgive me, but at least my father's trying to understand." The mill's grand opening was scheduled for June 20th, 5 months after construction began, a week ahead of schedule. The week before, Marcus worked 18-hour days on final details, hanging the restored historical photographs in the community gallery, testing the apartment plumbing, ensuring every storefront met code requirements. Claire helped where she could, painting walls and assembling furniture, and feeling deeply grateful to be part of something this tangible and real. Beam. 3 days before the opening, Claire was at the mill helping Marcus install the final piece of the historical exhibit, the original time clock where workers had punched in for decades. As they carefully mounted it on the wall, she heard footsteps behind them. Margaret Whitmore stood in the doorway. Claire's hands froze. Marcus immediately stepped back, giving them space. Her mother walked slowly into the main hall, looking around at the restored brick walls, the preserved wooden beams, the careful integration of old and new. "It's beautiful," Margaret said quietly. "I didn't expect it to be beautiful." "Mom, let me finish." Margaret turned to face her daughter. "I've spent 6 months being angry. Angry that you defied me. Angry that you chose this project over family loyalty. Angry that you chose Marcus Reed over our approval. But last week, your father showed me something." She pulled a folder from her purse, old documents, yellowed with age. "I've been researching my own family history. Did you know my great-grandmother worked at this mill? Before she married into the Whitmore family, before she became respectable, she was a line worker here for 8 years. I found her employment records at the Historical Society." Claire stared. "You never told me that." "Because I didn't know. Because the family story always started with my great-grandfather's success as a merchant, never with the working-class woman he married. We erased her history because it didn't fit the narrative we wanted." Margaret's voice cracked slightly. "I've spent my life believing that the Whitmore family represented something pure and superior. But we're built on the same working people we've spent generations looking down on. The mill workers, the factory laborers, the people who actually built this town, they're part of our story too. We just chose to forget them." She approached Marcus, who'd been standing silently near the wall. "Mr. Reed, I owe you an apology. I judged you based on prejudice and class bias, not on your actual character or work. What you've created here honors this building's history in ways I refuse to see. I'm sorry." Marcus nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Mrs. Whitmore." Margaret turned back to Claire. "I'm not going to pretend the last 6 months haven't been painful. You hurt me deeply when you chose to oppose me so publicly. But you were right about the things that mattered. This project deserves to exist. And Marcus—" She paused. "Marcus is clearly a good man who loves my daughter very much." Claire was crying now, unable to stop the tears. "Mom, I'm still angry," Margaret said, "and I'm still hurt. But I'm also your mother, and I've missed you terribly. Can we try to find our way back to each other?" They met in the middle of that restored mill floor, holding each other while Marcus quietly excused himself to give them privacy. Mother and daughter stood in the space that had become the center of their conflict and their eventual understanding, both of them crying, both of them wounded, both of them willing to try. The grand opening on June 20th was everything Marcus had dreamed. 300 people toured the building, marveling at the preserved industrial details and modern functionality. Former mill workers stood in the community gallery, pointing at photographs of themselves from decades earlier. Small business owners opened their new storefronts, a cafe, a bookstore, an art supply shop, a maker space. Young families toured the apartments, several signing leases on the spot. Claire's parents came, both of them. They shook Marcus's hand, toured the building with genuine interest, and stayed for the reception. Margaret even spoke briefly with Marcus's mother, an interaction that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. As the sun set and guests lingered over wine and cheese, Marcus found Claire on the loading dock, the same spot where they'd watched so many sunsets during construction. "We did it," he said. "You did it," she corrected. "I just helped clear the legal obstacles." "No, we did it together. You fought for this project when you had every reason to walk away. You risked everything, family, reputation, career, because you believed it was right. That kind of courage changes things, Claire. Changed me, changed your family, changed this whole town's understanding of whose history matters." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "So I have a question." Claire's breath caught. "I know this is fast. I know we've only been together 8 months. I know your family's barely started to accept me, and plenty of people in this town still think the Reeds aren't good enough for the Whitmores." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "But I also know I've never met anyone like you. You're brilliant and brave and principled in ways that make me want to be better. You see broken things, including me, and believe they're worth restoring. Marcus, I'm not the man you deserve yet," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I want to become him. I want to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. So, Claire Whitmore, will you marry me?" She thought about all the ways this would complicate things. Her family would have opinions, the town would gossip, their different backgrounds and histories would create ongoing challenges. Life with Marcus Reed would never be simple or easy or socially convenient. "Yes," she said, "absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her while the evening light painted the mountains gold and the restored mill stood solid behind them. Proof that broken things could be made whole, that history could be honored while building something new, that love could grow in the space between who you were raised to be and who you chose to become. Lul. They married in September in a small ceremony at the mill's community gallery, surrounded by both families and a carefully curated guest list that included former mill workers, Tom Parsons, Joyce, and the zoning board members who'd approved the project. Claire wore her grandmother Eleanor's wedding dress, altered to fit. Marcus wore a suit his mother had saved for years, imagining this moment even when it seemed impossible. Judge William Whitmore officiated, a moment that required months of healing and honest conversation, but one that symbolized true reconciliation. As he pronounced them husband and wife, Claire saw her mother crying in the front row, her father's arm around her shoulders. The reception lasted until midnight. Margaret Whitmore danced with Marcus's mother. Claire's father told stories about his own mother's working-class roots, details he'd never shared before. Young and old, wealthy and working-class, families that had avoided each other for generations, shared food and music and genuine celebration. "This is what the mill should be," Tom Parsons told Claire during the reception. "A place that brings the whole community together instead of dividing it into us and them." A year later, Claire opened her own practice, Whitmore and Reed Family Law, specializing in cases involving working families, custody issues, and tenant rights. Marcus's restoration business expanded, winning contracts for historic preservation projects across North Carolina. They bought a house halfway between the east and west sides of Ashton, both literally and symbolically bridging the town's class divide. Claire's relationship with her parents continued to improve slowly. Margaret joined the mill's community board, working alongside Marcus's mother to plan events and programs. William Whitmore began mentoring young lawyers from working-class backgrounds, creating opportunities his own generation had denied. 2 years after the wedding, Claire and Marcus stood in the mill's community gallery for its anniversary celebration. The space had become exactly what Marcus envisioned, a vibrant center of Ashton life where history was honored and the future was built together. "You know what I love most about this?" Claire said, watching children play near the restored time clock while their parents shopped in the local stores. "What's that?" "It proves that you don't have to erase history or pretend the past didn't happen. You can acknowledge all of it, the good and the bad, the beauty and the injustice, and still build something hopeful. We can honor the mill workers and recognize the class systems that exploited them. We can preserve the building and make it functional for modern life. We can love our families even while challenging the prejudices they raised us with." Marcus pulled her close. "You became exactly who you needed to be. So did you. You came back to a town that rejected you and proved them wrong, not through anger or revenge, but through beautiful, honest work. You became the man you wanted to be, and you helped me become the woman I needed to be." They stood together in the mill they'd fought for, two people from opposite sides of a small town's invisible divide, who'd found each other in a courthouse basement and chosen to build something better than what they'd inherited. The mill's restoration was complete, but their work continued, raising a community, healing old wounds, proving that love and principle could overcome prejudice and fear. Outside, the autumn light painted the Blue Ridge foothills gold and crimson, and Ashton moved forward into its future, imperfect, complicated, but finally willing to honor all its histories and all its people. The story that began with "I'm not the man you deserve" had found its answer in Claire's whispered response, "Then become him." Udin, and in becoming themselves, Marcus the principled craftsman, Claire the courageous advocate, they'd created something neither family could have imagined. A love that transformed not just themselves, but an entire community's understanding of whose stories mattered and whose dreams deserved to be built.